Deep in her crystalline palace aboard the massive Xalian mothership, Queen Red watched the holographic display of Earth with growing disdain. Her tall, armored frame cast long shadows across the command center as her four arms crossed against her chitinous chest. The blue planet spinning before her seemed unremarkable, yet it had caught the attention of her scout ships. "Tell me again," she commanded her intelligence officer, Blue. "What makes these humans worth our time?" Blue stepped forward, his smaller frame dwarfed by the Queen's impressive height. "My Queen, they have achieved spaceflight, though primitive. They have wars, but their weapons seem inefficient. They lack natural armor, claws, or venom." Queen Red clicked her mandibles in amusement. "Show me their warriors." The hologram shifted to display human soldiers in combat. The Queen watched as they moved about, covered in what she considered flimsy protective gear, carrying primitive projectile weapons. "They're so small," she laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. "Even their largest specimens barely reach my shoulder. And they only have 2 arms. How do they expect to fight properly?" The other Xalian officers joined in her laughter, their clicks and chirps filling the room. Only Blue remained serious, studying the footage with careful attention. "There is something else, my Queen," he said. "They have a strange quality. Despite their obvious physical limitations, they have dominated their planet. They've survived multiple extinction events, adapted to every environment, and continue to advance their technology at an impressive rate." Queen Red waved one of her arms dismissively. "Many species show promise before encountering us. All eventually submit to Xalian might." She turned to her military commander, Green. "Prepare a diplomatic vessel. We'll make official contact." Green stepped forward, his battle-scarred armor gleaming. "Is diplomacy necessary? We could simply—" "No," the Queen interrupted. "The Galactic Council watches us closely. We'll follow their protocols. For now. Besides," she added with a cruel smile, "it will be more entertaining this way." 3 days later, the diplomatic vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere, deliberately choosing to land near the United Nations headquarters in New York. The Xalian ship, shaped like a massive arrowhead, cast a shadow over the city as it hovered. Earth's leaders scrambled to respond. Military jets escorted the alien craft, though their presence seemed laughable to the Xalians on board. News channels worldwide broadcast the historic moment as the first official alien contact began. Queen Red watched the chaos from her mothership, still hidden behind Earth's moon. Her mandibles twitched with amusement as she observed the humans running about like scared prey. "Look how they scurry," she mocked. "Their leaders gather like frightened herd animals." Blue continued monitoring the situation. "My Queen, they're organizing faster than expected. Their military response is coordinated. Different nations are actually working together." "It won't matter," Queen Red declared. "Once they see our true might, they'll understand their place in the galaxy. Send the message." The diplomatic vessel transmitted its first communication to Earth. "Greetings, people of Earth. We come representing the Xalian Empire, seeking peaceful contact and cultural exchange." Queen Red laughed at the carefully worded message. Her real plans were far less peaceful. She intended to study these humans up close, learn their weaknesses, and then add Earth to her growing empire. It was a strategy that had worked countless times before. Soon, she chittered to herself, they'll understand true power, true strength. She extended one clawed hand toward the holographic Earth, as if grasping it. These humans think they're strong because they've never faced real warriors, never faced the Xalians. But as she watched the humans efficiently organizing their response to first contact, a tiny flicker of doubt crept into her mind. She quickly dismissed it. After all, what could these small, soft, two-armed creatures possibly do against her empire of born warriors? She would soon find out just how wrong she was about humanity's strength. 2 weeks after first contact, Queen Red made her first public appearance on Earth. The UN General Assembly Hall buzzed with tension as the massive Xalian ruler ducked through the doorway, her armored frame gleaming under the lights. Beside her walked Earth's chosen representative, General Tom. He stood tall despite barely reaching the Queen's chest height. The contrast between them was striking. Her 4 arms and chitinous armor against his simple military dress uniform. "Your warriors," Queen Red announced, her translator converting her clicks into English. "We wish to see them in action." General Tom nodded carefully. "We've arranged a demonstration as requested. Our best Special Forces teams will show their capabilities." The demonstration took place at a military base. Elite soldiers from different nations showed their skills. Hand-to-hand combat, weapons handling, and tactical operations. Queen Red watched with growing contempt, her mandibles twitching in what the humans now recognized as amusement. Finally, she raised all 4 arms, signaling for the demonstration to stop. "Is this truly the best Earth can offer?" Her laughter rattled through her translator. "Even our children show more fighting spirit." The assembled military leaders tensed. General Tom kept his face neutral, years of diplomatic training hiding his anger. "Perhaps," Queen Red continued, "a proper demonstration is needed." She turned to the cameras broadcasting worldwide. "I challenge Earth to send their greatest warrior to face my champion Thorn." The massive door of the Xalian ship opened, and out stepped a creature that made even the Queen look small. Thorn's armor was scarred from countless battles, his 6 arms each ending in deadly claws. He stood 3 meters tall, his mandibles clicking in anticipation. "One battle," the Queen declared. "If your champion wins, we will recognize Earth as equals. If not," she let the threat hang in the air. The UN Security Council gathered for an emergency session. Representatives argued late into the night. "We can't ignore this challenge," the Russian delegate insisted. "It would make us look weak." "But who could we send against that monster?" asked another representative. "It's suicide." In the back of the room, General Tom studied a file. "I have a suggestion," he said quietly, but the room fell silent. "Jack Stone." Murmurs filled the chamber. Everyone knew the name. "He's retired," someone protested. "He's our best option," General Tom countered. 20 years Special Forces, expert in multiple combat styles. More importantly, he understands how to fight larger opponents. The council deliberated for another hour before reaching their decision. General Tom made the call himself. In a small cabin in the mountains, Jack Stone watched the Queen's challenge on his old TV. He wasn't surprised when his phone rang. "I'm retired, Tom," he said by way of greeting. "The world needs you, Jack," General Tom replied. "One last mission." There was a long pause. "That thing's twice my size." "Since when has that stopped you?" Jack looked at his reflection in the window. Gray hair, weathered face, but still fit at 50. He thought about all the times humans had been underestimated, all the times they'd proved their strength. "When do you need me?" The next day, Jack stood before the UN Security Council. Queen Red had been invited to observe. She actually laughed when she saw him. "This?" She clicked in amusement. "This is your champion. He's even smaller than your other warriors." Jack said nothing, simply studying Thorn with experienced eyes, already noting potential weaknesses. "The battle will be in 1 Earth month," Queen Red declared. "Enough time for your champion to prepare for his defeat." As she left with her entourage, Jack finally spoke. "She really doesn't understand humans, does she?" General Tom smiled slightly. "No, she doesn't. That's going to be her biggest mistake." The world held its breath as the countdown to the battle began, while in his mountain cabin, Jack Stone started preparing for the fight of his life, and perhaps the fight for humanity's future. In the pre-dawn darkness of his mountain training ground, Jack Stone studied the holographic footage of Xalian combat for the 100th time. The recordings, provided by their own diplomatic broadcasts, showed their warriors in action. Every movement, every strike, he watched with intense focus. "They're predictable," he muttered to himself, making notes. "All power, no subtlety." General Tom stood nearby, watching Jack analyze the footage. "What have you found?" "They rely on their natural advantages," Jack explained, freezing one frame. "Look here. Thorn always leads with his upper right arms. Strong, but leaves his left side exposed for almost 2 seconds. The training area around them was specially designed to prepare for the fight. 6 mechanical arms, each programmed to mirror Xalian combat patterns, hung from reinforced frames. Padding covered the ground, already showing wear from weeks of intense practice. Their armor," Jack continued, pointing to another frame, "has gaps at the joints. They don't protect them because most species can't strike fast enough to exploit that weakness. But humans," he smiled slightly, "we're quicker than they think." Jack's daily routine was brutal. He started before sunrise with endurance training, running the mountain trails with weighted gear. By mid-morning, he practiced against the mechanical arms, learning to dodge and counter multiple limbs, striking from different angles. "They're used to opponents who try to match their strength," he explained to the team of combat analysts watching him. "That's not how humans survived. We outlast. We adapt." In the afternoons, he studied Xalian biology. Their species had evolved as apex predators, but that came with limitations. They tired quickly in prolonged fights, expecting to overwhelm opponents with initial attacks. One day, while practicing evasion techniques, General Tom brought a visitor, a xenobiologist named Dr. Smith. "Their blood," Dr. Smith explained, pointing to a diagram, "doesn't carry oxygen as efficiently as ours. In their home environment, with higher oxygen levels, it doesn't matter. But here on Earth," Jack nodded, understanding, "they'll tire faster. That's why their fights are always short." The training evolved. Jack worked in an oxygen-reduced chamber, improving his stamina in conditions that would match the arena. He practiced fighting in the dark, knowing his human eyes adapted better to low light than Xalian compound eyes. "Remember," General Tom advised, "Queen Red's watching everything. She has scouts observing your training." "Good," Jack replied, wrapping his hands. "Let them see what they expect to see." In public training sessions, Jack focused on strength training and direct combat. But in secret, deep in his mountain facility, he practiced different skills: speed, endurance, and most importantly, psychological warfare. "Xalians have never lost to a lesser species," Dr. Smith noted during one session. "They don't know how to handle failure." 2 weeks before the fight, Queen Red visited the training facility. She watched Jack practice against the mechanical arms, her mandibles clicking in amusement. "Impressive," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "For a human, but Thorn will break you in minutes." Jack just continued his exercises, saying nothing. His silence seemed to irritate her more than any response could have. On the final day of training, General Tom found Jack sitting quietly, watching the sunset. "Having doubts?" the general asked. Jack shook his head. "Just thinking about humanity's history. We've always been the smaller, weaker species. No claws, no armor, no venom. But we're still here. We survived ice ages, predators, diseases, and we did it by being smarter, more adaptable." He stood up, stretching his battle-hardened frame. "The Queen thinks size and strength determine everything. She forgot the most important rule of Earth's history, which is, the biggest ones are always the first to fall." Tomorrow, the fight would begin. Jack was ready to teach the Xalians why humans had become Earth's dominant species. The arena, a massive structure built by the Xalians in just 2 weeks, loomed over the Nevada desert. Its crystalline walls glowed with an inner light, and floating cameras buzzed through the air like mechanical insects. Billions across Earth and throughout the galaxy watched through the live broadcast. Inside her private viewing chamber, Queen Red reclined on her throne, surrounded by her commanders. "Look at them," she clicked, watching the humans fill the stadium seats, so confident in their little champion. Below, in the preparation area, Jack Stone wrapped his hands with simple cloth bindings. He had declined the offered high-tech armor, choosing instead to wear only light, flexible protection. His outfit was plain: black combat pants and a fitted gray shirt. "The whole world's watching," General Tom said, standing nearby. "No pressure." Jack allowed himself a small smile. Pressure's what humans do best. The arena floor was circular, 100 meters across, with walls 20 meters high. The ground was a mixture of sand and hard-packed earth, a surface that Thorne would find uncomfortably similar to Earth's natural terrain rather than his homeworld's crystal plains. A deep horn sounded, vibrating through the structure. Jack walked out through his entrance, looking deceptively small in the vast space. The crowd's roar was deafening. Minutes later, Thorne emerged from the opposite entrance. The Xalian warrior had to duck to enter, his massive frame casting long shadows. All 6 of his arms bore ceremonial armor, gleaming under the arena lights. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of eagerness for combat. Queen Red's voice boomed through the speakers. "The rules are simple. Fight continues until submission or..." She paused dramatically, inability to continue. "Begin." Thorne immediately charged forward, his footsteps shaking the ground. Jack stood still, watching, waiting. At the last possible moment, he sidestepped, moving just enough to avoid the rush. The crowd gasped as Thorne's momentum carried him past. The Xalian warrior spun with surprising speed, all 6 arms spreading wide. "Stand still, little human," Thorne's translator boomed. "Die with honor." Jack remained silent, circling slowly. Thorne attacked again, his arms launching a complex series of strikes. Jack weaved through them, never blocking directly, always moving just enough to avoid contact. In her chamber, Queen Red leaned forward. Something wasn't right. The human wasn't fighting as she'd seen in his training sessions. The first 5 minutes passed this way. Thorne attacking, Jack evading. The crowd watched in tense silence as the human seemed to almost dance around his massive opponent. "Fight back," Thorne roared, his movements becoming slightly less coordinated. Sweat began to show on his exoskeleton, something Xalians rarely experienced in combat. Jack kept moving, his breathing steady, controlled. He had yet to throw a single punch or attempt any attack. The audience began to understand. This wasn't a normal fight. This was a battle of endurance. 10 minutes in, Thorne's attacks slowed noticeably. The Earth atmosphere, thinner than his homeworld, was taking its toll. His massive muscles, evolved for explosive power, were burning through oxygen faster than his blood could replenish it. Queen Red gripped her throne's arms tightly. "Impossible," she clicked to her commanders. "The human hasn't even engaged yet." 15 minutes passed. Thorne's movements became labored, his mighty arms dropping slightly after each attack. Still, Jack moved, always just out of reach, never wasting energy on unnecessary movement. The crowd began to cheer each time Jack evaded, understanding now what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a fight. It was a demonstration of humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt and overcome through intelligence rather than brute force. As the 20th minute approached, Thorne stood heaving, his armor dulled with sweat, his movements sluggish, and for the first time since the fight began, Jack Stone stopped moving. He turned to face his opponent directly, and those close enough could see the slight smile on his face. Now finally, the real fight would begin. Jack Stone stood facing the exhausted Xalian warrior, his stance relaxed but ready. For the first time since the fight began, he spoke. "Ready to actually fight now." Thorne roared in rage, his translator unable to keep up with his clicking mandibles. He charged again, but his movements were slower, less coordinated. Jack didn't dodge this time. Instead, he stepped into the attack. The crowd gasped as the human moved towards danger rather than away. Jack slipped between Thorne's grasping arms and struck. Quick, precise hits to the joint gaps he'd studied for weeks. Each blow made Thorne's armor ring like a bell. "Impossible," Queen Red stood from her throne. How is he hitting so hard? The answer lay in physics, something humans had mastered over centuries of combat. Jack wasn't just striking. He was using Thorn's own momentum against him, multiplying the force of each precisely aimed hit. Thorn swung wildly with 4 arms, leaving his lower body exposed. Jack dropped and swept the Xalian's legs, a move that shouldn't have worked against someone so massive. But Thorn's balance was compromised by exhaustion, and he staggered. Your species evolved as ambush predators, Jack said, circling again. Great for short fights. Humans, we evolved as pursuit predators. We can go all day. The human's words were broadcast throughout the arena. Queen Red clicked in fury as she realized her champion had fallen into a trap. All those training sessions they'd observed, they'd been watching what Jack wanted them to see. Thorn recovered his footing and launched another attack, but now Jack began fighting in earnest. He moved like water around the massive arms, striking vulnerable points with surgical precision. Each hit targeted nerve clusters that the xenobiologists had identified. We studied you, Jack continued, his voice steady despite the intense combat. While you were busy laughing at our size, we were learning every weakness of your species. A particularly solid strike to Thorn's knee joint made the warrior stumble. The crowd roared as their champion pressed his advantage, never letting up, never giving the Xalian time to recover. Humans don't win because we're the strongest, Jack said, ducking under a wild swing. We win because we never stop learning, never stop adapting. In her viewing chamber, Queen Red watched in growing horror as her undefeated champion began to falter. She had expected a quick, brutal display of Xalian superiority. Instead, she was watching a masterclass in human combat tactics. Thorn's attacks grew desperate. He tried to grapple Jack, to use his superior size to crush the human. But Jack was ready. He turned Thorn's own momentum against him once again, using a simple leverage throw that sent the massive warrior crashing to the ground. The impact shook the arena. Before Thorn could recover, Jack had him in a joint lock that threatened to break one of his primary arms. The position was precisely calculated. Thorn's other arms couldn't reach to help without causing himself more pain. Submit, Jack said quietly, increasing the pressure slightly. There's no shame in it. Thorn struggled for a moment longer, then slammed his free hand against the ground 3 times, the universal signal of submission. The arena erupted in cheers. Jack immediately released the hold and stepped back, offering a hand to help his fallen opponent up. The gesture, simple but powerful, was not lost on the watching audience. Queen Red sat frozen on her throne, her mandibles completely still, a sign of shock in her species. She had just witnessed something unprecedented, a human defeating a Xalian warrior not through luck or trickery, but through superior strategy, endurance, and skill. As Jack helped Thorn to his feet, the massive warrior clicked something that his translator conveyed with perfect clarity. I understand now. You were fighting me from the first moment, weren't you? Every step, every dodge. Jack nodded. That's another thing about humans. The fight doesn't start when the first punch is thrown. It starts in here. He tapped his temple. The lesson was clear to all watching. Never underestimate humanity's hidden strengths. The arena fell silent as Jack Stone stood in its center, his victory still sinking in for the billions watching across Earth and the galaxy. Thorn, the defeated champion, had been helped away by medical teams, but not before giving Jack a warrior's salute, a gesture that sent shockwaves through Xalian society. Queen Red rose from her throne, her massive frame rigid with barely controlled fury. Protocol demanded she address the outcome. As she made her way to the announcement platform, her commanders watched nervously. No Xalian monarch had ever faced such a situation. The Queen's voice boomed through the arena speakers. The human has. She paused, mandibles clicking, proven himself worthy. Jack stepped forward, his movements still smooth despite the intense fight. He showed no signs of exhaustion, proving that his earlier display of endurance hadn't been a bluff. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the broadcast systems, "I didn't just prove myself worthy. I proved humanity worthy." The crowd held its breath. No one had ever dared address the Queen this way after combat. "You came to our world thinking size, determined strength," Jack continued. "You saw our smaller frames and assumed weakness. That was your first mistake." Queen Red's forearms twitched, but ancient laws prevented her from striking a victorious champion. "Your second mistake," Jack went on, "was not studying your history. Every species that ever underestimated humanity has learned the same lesson. We don't need natural armor or extra limbs. We have something far more powerful: the ability to adapt, to learn, to overcome." The cameras caught everything. The proud stance of the human warrior, the rigid posture of the Thessalian queen, the attentive silence of the crowd. "Today wasn't about one fighter beating another," Jack said, addressing not just the queen, but the entire watching galaxy. "It was about showing why humanity has survived everything our world has thrown at us. We study our opponents. We find ways to turn their strengths against them. We never stop learning, never stop improving." Queen Red's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of growing understanding mixed with discomfort. Her species valued strength above all, but here was a different kind of strength she had never considered. "The galaxy should understand this," Jack declared. "Humanity doesn't seek conflict, but we will never back down from a challenge. We've faced extinction-level events, ice ages, predators that dwarfed your champion in size. We survived because we adapted." He turned to face the Earth delegation, where General Tom stood smiling proudly. "We're not the strongest species, or the biggest, or the most naturally armed, but we are the most adaptable. That's humanity's true strength." The arena erupted in cheers. Even some of the Thessalian observers were clicking their mandibles in what their species considered applause. Queen Red raised all four arms for silence. When she spoke, her translator conveyed a tone of reluctant respect. "The combat is concluded. Earth has proven its worth. The Thessalian Empire recognizes humanity as—" She seemed to struggle with the words, "as equals." The celebration that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Humans across the world poured into streets, celebrating not just victory but vindication. Their species, often dismissed by the galactic community, had proven itself on the grandest stage possible. In the arena's medical bay, Thorne was already analyzing the fight with his attendants, insisting that every moment be recorded for future study. The Thessalian warrior had learned something his queen was just beginning to understand. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their physical capabilities, but their unending drive to adapt and overcome. As Jack left the arena, General Tom met him with a simple handshake. No grand gestures needed. They both knew what this meant for humanity's future. "Think they finally understand?" Tom asked. Jack looked back at the arena, where Queen Red still stood, her posture showing she was deep in thought. "They're starting to," he replied. "And that's the most dangerous thing about underestimating humans. By the time you realize your mistake, we've already won." The day marked not just a victory, but a turning point in galactic history. Humanity had arrived on the cosmic stage, and nothing would ever be the same. 1 month after the historic fight, Queen Red sat in her private study aboard the Thessalian mothership, watching historical footage of human conflicts. Her views on humanity had undergone a dramatic shift since Jack Stone's victory. "Show me the primitive era again," she commanded her AI system. The holographic display shifted to show ancient human hunters taking down massive mammals through endurance and teamwork. "Fascinating," she clicked softly. "Even without weapons, they succeeded." The door chimed, and Blue entered, carrying new data crystals. "My queen, we've completed our revised analysis of human military history. Tell me," she ordered, her forearms gesturing for him to continue. "They fought more wars against themselves than any other known species," Blue reported. "Each conflict drove innovation, adaptation, and strategic evolution. Their weapons changed, their tactics evolved, but one thing remained constant: their ability to learn and adapt. The Queen nodded, remembering how Jack Stone had used this same principle in the arena, and their current global situation. Despite having multiple nations and cultures, they united quickly when faced with external challenges. Our arrival actually strengthened their cooperation. It's unprecedented. On Earth, changes were happening rapidly. The UN Security Council had established a new department focused on galactic relations, with General Tom as its head. Jack Stone, despite numerous offers for leadership positions, had returned to his mountain cabin, though he now served as a special advisor on interspecies combat training. Queen Red's diplomatic vessel, now genuinely focused on peaceful relations, had become a common sight over major Earth cities. Xalian warriors trained alongside human special forces, each species learning from the other. "They're smaller than us," a young Xalian warrior observed during one such session, "but they never make the same mistake twice. They adapt faster than any species we've encountered." The galactic community had taken notice. Species that had previously ignored Earth now sent delegations. Trade agreements were being negotiated, and human innovations, particularly in adaptive technology and tactical thinking, were in high demand. In her study, Queen Red watched footage of human children playing sports. Even their young engage in complex strategic games, she noted. They're training for adaptation without realizing it. Blue nodded. Their entire society encourages innovation. They have a saying: "Necessity is the mother of invention." And now they're pushing into space, the Queen mused, not through natural ability like the Drift clans, or through inherited technology like the Mer Collective. They're doing it through pure determination and ingenuity. A message flashed across her display. Another request for joint military exercises from Earth's governments. This time, instead of dismissing it, she approved it immediately. "Send word to our training academies," she ordered Blue. "I want human tactical advisors, not just for combat, but for strategy, adaptation, and innovation." "Some traditionalists will object," Blue warned. "Let them." The Queen clicked firmly. "The galaxy is changing. Those who don't adapt will be left behind. Humans have taught us this lesson well." On Earth, Jack sat on his cabin porch, watching the sunset. A Xalian training ship performed maneuvers in the distance, its crystalline hull catching the fading light. General Tom's voice came through his communicator. "The Queen has approved all our proposals. Humanity is officially part of the Galactic Defense Council." Jack smiled. Not bad for a species they thought was too small to matter. "The Queen asked specifically about you," Tom added. "She wants you to write a book about human combat philosophy." "Tell her I'll think about it," Jack replied, knowing he probably would. After all, teaching was another way humans ensured their survival, by passing on knowledge. In her study, Queen Red made one final entry in the royal archives. "Let it be known that on this day, the Xalian Empire acknowledges its greatest lesson. True strength lies not in size, not in natural weapons, but in the ability to adapt, to learn, and to grow. Humanity has taught us this, and we are stronger for having learned it. The galaxy would never again underestimate the small, resourceful species from the third planet of a modest solar system." Humanity had proven that size and natural advantages meant little compared to the power of adaptation and determination. The age of human influence in the galaxy had begun.